They say that some people never learn to respect boundaries, but I never expected that my mother-in-law's obsession with controlling our family would lead her to systematically sabotage my career by spreading lies to my professional contacts and clients, ultimately driving me to orchestrate a revenge so comprehensive that it exposed her malicious campaign and destroyed her standing in the community. My name is Charles, and this is the story of how discovering my mother-in-law's deliberate destruction of my professional reputation led me to expose her toxic behavior in the most devastating way possible. My wife Emma and I had been married for 6 years when I started my own consulting business in marketing and business development. Emma's mother, Diane, had always been a controlling presence in our relationship, but my decision to become an entrepreneur seemed to trigger an intense campaign of interference and sabotage that I initially failed to recognize. Diane had always been critical of my career choices and had frequently expressed her opinion that I was not ambitious enough or successful enough for her daughter. When I left my corporate job to start my own business, Diane made it clear that she viewed this decision as irresponsible and potentially damaging to Emma's financial security. From the beginning, Diane inserted herself into conversations about my business in ways that were inappropriate and unwelcome. She would ask detailed questions about my clients, my revenue, and my business strategy, and she would offer unsolicited advice about how I should be running my company. Most concerning of all, Diane began to position herself as someone who was knowledgeable about my business and qualified to speak about my professional capabilities. She would mention my work in conversations with her friends and acquaintances, and she would present herself as having insider knowledge about my success or failure as an entrepreneur. Initially, I thought Diane's behavior was simply the result of concern about Emma's financial future and her desire to understand how my business would affect our family's economic stability. I assumed that her involvement would decrease over time as my business became more established and successful. However, as months passed, I began to notice that my business development efforts were encountering unexpected obstacles and setbacks. Potential clients who had initially expressed strong interest in my services would suddenly become distant or unresponsive. Professional contacts who had been supportive and encouraging would begin to seem skeptical or concerned about working with me. Most troubling of all, I began to hear rumors and concerns about my business that seemed to be circulating within my professional network. People would mention that they had heard negative things about my company or my capabilities, but they were often vague about the source of these concerns. When I tried to investigate these issues and understand why my professional relationships were deteriorating, I discovered that someone had been systematically spreading negative information about my business and my character to my clients, prospects, and professional contacts. The rumors being spread about me were sophisticated and damaging. Someone was suggesting that my business was financially unstable, that I was unreliable and unprofessional, and that I had a history of disappointing clients and failing to deliver on my promises. Most insidious of all, the person spreading these rumors was presenting themselves as someone who had insider knowledge about my business and personal life, and who was sharing this information out of concern for the people who might be considering working with me. I realized that these rumors were not random gossip or competitive sabotage from business rivals. They were too specific, too well-informed, and too strategically targeted to be anything other than a deliberate campaign by someone who had access to detailed information about my business and my professional relationships. The investigation into the source of these rumors led me to a shocking discovery. Diane had been systematically contacting my clients, prospects, and professional contacts to share negative information about my business and to discourage them from working with me. Diane had been using her knowledge of my business activities, which she had gained through her inappropriate questioning and involvement in our family conversations, to identify the people who were most important to my professional success. She had then been contacting these people directly to share damaging information about me. The scope of Diane's sabotage was staggering. She had contacted dozens of my clients and prospects, and she had been spreading rumors and concerns that were designed to destroy my credibility and reputation in my industry. Most shocking of all, Diane had been presenting herself to my professional contacts as a concerned family member who was trying to protect them from making a mistake by working with me. She had been using her status as Emma's mother to gain credibility and to make her negative information seem more reliable and trustworthy. Diane had also been using sophisticated techniques to make her sabotage seem credible and legitimate. She would reference specific projects or clients to demonstrate her insider knowledge, and she would present her concerns in ways that seemed reasonable and well-intentioned. I realized that Diane's campaign against my business was not simply the result of concern about Emma's financial future or disapproval of my career choices. She was deliberately and systematically trying to destroy my professional success as a way of maintaining control over our family and ensuring that I remained dependent on traditional employment rather than building independent financial security. Diane's strategy was sophisticated and effective. By damaging my professional reputation and sabotaging my business relationships, she was making it more difficult for me to succeed as an entrepreneur and more likely that I would be forced to return to corporate employment where she felt I would be more stable and predictable. I decided that Diane needed to face serious consequences for her malicious behavior and that my professional contacts needed to understand the truth about what she had been doing. I wanted to expose her sabotage campaign and restore my reputation in my industry. The plan I developed was designed to document Diane's sabotage, gather evidence of her systematic campaign against my business, and expose her behavior to the people she had been deceiving. I wanted her to lose the credibility and influence she had been using to damage my career. Phase 1 involved carefully documenting Diane's contacts with my professional network, including recording conversations where possible and gathering evidence of the specific lies and rumors she had been spreading about my business. Phase 2 involved reaching out to my clients and prospects individually to understand what Diane had been telling them about me and to gather evidence of the damage her sabotage had caused to my professional relationships. Phase 3 involved confronting Diane with evidence of her behavior and giving her an opportunity to acknowledge what she had been doing and to make amends for the damage she had caused to my career. Phase 4 involved exposing Diane's behavior to my professional network and to the broader community, sharing the evidence I had gathered and explaining how she had been deceiving and manipulating people. The final phase involved establishing clear boundaries with Diane and ensuring that she could no longer interfere with my business or damage my professional relationships. The investigation phase took several weeks, during which I carefully documented Diane's contacts with my professional network and gathered evidence of her sabotage campaign. I was able to record several conversations where she made false and damaging statements about my business and my character. I also reached out to clients and prospects individually to understand what Diane had been telling them about me. What I discovered was even worse than I had suspected. Diane had been telling elaborate lies about my business practices, my financial situation, and my professional capabilities, and she had been encouraging people to be suspicious and distrustful of me. Most shocking of all, I learned that Diane had been actively trying to turn my professional contacts against me by suggesting that I was dishonest, unreliable, or incompetent. She had been using fear and suspicion as tools to isolate me professionally and damage my ability to build a successful business. The evidence I gathered was comprehensive and undeniable. I had recordings of Diane's lies, witness statements from professional contacts who had been deceived by her, and documentation of the specific damage her sabotage had caused to my business relationships and revenue. The confrontation with Diane happened on a Saturday afternoon in November, exactly 14 months after I had started my business. I had arranged to meet with her privately to discuss her behavior and to give her an opportunity to acknowledge what she had been doing. Instead of the defensive denial I expected, Diane initially tried to justify her behavior by claiming that she was protecting my professional contacts from making a mistake by working with me. She suggested that her sabotage had been necessary to prevent people from being disappointed or harmed by my business practices. But when I presented her with specific evidence of her lies and the damage she had caused, Diane's justifications became increasingly desperate and contradictory. She could not explain why she had told different people different versions of the same stories, or why she had shared confidential information about my business that she had no right to disclose. When Diane realized that her justifications were not credible, she changed tactics and tried to minimize the significance of her behavior. She suggested that her sabotage had been harmless and that any damage to my business was the result of my own professional shortcomings rather than her interference. But I was not interested in Diane's attempts to avoid responsibility for her malicious behavior. She had deliberately and systematically sabotaged my business and damaged my professional reputation, and she needed to face the consequences of her actions. I told Diane that I planned to expose her behavior to my professional network and to the broader community, and that I would be sharing the evidence I had gathered about her lies and sabotage. I wanted her to understand that her campaign against my business had been discovered and documented. Diane was devastated to learn that her behavior would be exposed and that she would lose the credibility and influence she had been using to control our lives. She begged me to handle the matter privately and suggested that she would stop interfering with my business if I agreed not to share the evidence with other people. But I had already made the decision that Diane's behavior needed to be exposed and that my professional contacts needed to understand the truth about what she had been doing. Her sabotage had been too extensive and damaging for me to consider a private resolution. The exposure of Diane's behavior was swift and comprehensive. I shared the evidence I had gathered with my professional network, including recordings of her lies and documentation of the specific damage her sabotage had caused to my business relationships. I also organized a presentation for key members of my professional community where I detailed Diane's campaign against my business, including specific examples of her lies and sabotage. I wanted everyone to understand how they had been deceived and how Diane had been using them as tools in her effort to destroy my career. The reaction from my professional contacts was one of shock and anger as they realized how they had been manipulated and deceived. People who had believed Diane's lies felt betrayed and embarrassed, and they were furious to learn that they had been used as weapons in her campaign against my business. Most importantly, the exposure of Diane's behavior completely destroyed her credibility and influence in my professional community. People who had previously respected her as a concerned family member and reliable source of information now saw her as a malicious saboteur who could not be trusted. The professional presentation also served as an opportunity for my contacts to share their own experiences with Diane's manipulation and to understand how she had been playing them against each other. Many people realized that Diane had been spreading rumors and creating conflicts throughout my professional network, not just targeting my business directly. The most satisfying aspect of Diane's downfall was watching her realize that her campaign of lies and sabotage had ultimately achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of destroying my business and forcing me back into corporate employment, her behavior had exposed her true character and strengthened my relationships with my professional community. Diane had thought she was being clever by using my professional contacts as tools in her effort to control my career, but she had failed to consider that her lies would eventually be discovered and that people would be angry to learn how they had been deceived and manipulated. The aftermath of the exposure was decisive and comprehensive. Diane's reputation in my professional community and the broader business network was completely destroyed, and she was no longer able to interfere with my business or influence my professional relationships. My professional contacts, who had previously been distant and suspicious because of Diane's lies, became supportive and apologetic once they understood the truth. Many people reached out to express their regret for believing Diane's stories and to rebuild the business relationships that her sabotage had damaged. Most importantly, Emma finally understood the extent of her mother's toxic behavior and the damage it had been causing to our marriage and our financial future. The evidence I had gathered made it impossible for Emma to continue defending Diane or minimizing the significance of her actions. Emma and I were able to establish clear boundaries with Diane, including restrictions on her access to information about my business and her interactions with my professional contacts. We made it clear that any future attempts to interfere with my career or spread lies about my business would result in complete estrangement. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of recognizing and confronting malicious behavior, even when it comes from family members. I learned that toxic people can use their relationships and their perceived authority to cause tremendous damage to other people's careers and livelihoods. Looking back on this experience, I am proud of the way I handled the discovery of Diane's campaign against my business. I could have confronted her immediately when I first became suspicious, but instead I took the time to gather comprehensive evidence that exposed the full scope of her sabotage. The professional network that Diane had tried to turn against me became a source of support and business opportunities once the truth was revealed. People who had been deceived by her lies became allies in my effort to build the successful business that she had been trying to prevent. Diane's campaign of lies and sabotage had been interconnected attacks against my career, my financial future, and my family's economic security. She had been willing to deceive and manipulate innocent people as tools in her effort to control and undermine my professional success. The revenge I orchestrated against Diane was comprehensive and devastating, but it was also necessary to protect my interests and restore my reputation in my industry. She had chosen to build her control on lies and sabotage, and she had to face the full consequences of her choices. The professional relationships that had enabled Diane's sabotage had also provided the witnesses needed to expose her behavior and hold her accountable. The irony was not lost on me that the very people she had tried to turn against me had become the evidence of her manipulation. In the end, Diane's elaborate campaign had achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of destroying my business and maintaining control over my career, her lies had ultimately cost her all credibility and influence, and had resulted in complete estrangement from our family. The most important outcome of this entire experience was that I was able to reclaim my professional reputation and my business relationships from Diane's web of lies and sabotage. I was no longer living under the shadow of her toxic influence, and I was free to build my business based on honest relationships and genuine professional merit. The evidence that had exposed Diane's campaign served as a reminder that malicious behavior ultimately leaves traces that can be discovered and documented. Her careful planning and elaborate lies had ultimately been no match for thorough investigation and professional accountability. Diane learned that campaigns built on lies and sabotage come with consequences that extend far beyond the immediate control they are meant to provide. She lost her relationships, her reputation, and her standing in the community. She discovered that the trust and respect of her family and professional community, once broken through systematic deception, could not be easily repaired or replaced. Her sabotage had destroyed not just my business relationships, but also her connections with people who had previously respected and trusted her. The revenge was complete, the truth was exposed, and I was finally free to build my business based on the values of honesty and integrity that Diane had abandoned. I had won not just a professional victory in exposing her behavior, but a personal victory that protected my family's financial future from her manipulation. Looking forward, I carried with me the lessons I had learned about the importance of recognizing malicious behavior, the dangers of allowing toxic people to access professional information, and the need to investigate suspicious patterns rather than accepting setbacks at face value. The experience had been professionally damaging and emotionally traumatic, but it had also been educational and ultimately liberating. I had learned that I was capable of handling systematic sabotage with strategic thinking and professional action, and I had proven to myself that I would not tolerate malicious behavior even when it came from family members. Diane's story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of using family relationships to commit professional sabotage, and about the way that malicious behavior ultimately destroys not just the careers it is meant to control, but the character and reputation of the people who choose deception over support. Her downfall served as a reminder that exploiting family relationships and professional trust for personal control is ultimately unsustainable and self-destructive, and that malicious behavior ultimately destroys not just the businesses it is meant to sabotage, but the standing and credibility of the people who choose sabotage over genuine concern. The professional relationships that had been meant to represent my business network had instead become the battlefield where Diane's sabotage was exposed and defeated. In the end, the revenge was not just about exposing Diane's lies or restoring my professional reputation. It was about vindicating the principles of honesty, professional integrity, and family support that she had abandoned, and about proving that malicious behavior will ultimately be discovered and punished. The business that Diane had tried to destroy through her lies and sabotage was replaced by a stronger understanding of what genuine professional relationships should look like, built on transparency, mutual respect, and shared commitment to honesty in all business dealings. Her betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been educational, and I was determined to use those lessons to build better professional relationships in the future based on the values that truly mattered to my career and my family.